Yeah, so I want to show you now what the folder actually contains here. And first of all, we have this old code down here that was what I showed you for the just to show you Express and stuff like that. Now, I want to actually move up one level, so I'll open another folder. I'll open the course planner folder instead. Right now we were at the root, but I want to go into the course planner and only watch that single folder. Just to make it simpler for you to follow along. Now I only have the course planner here. I don't have the Node.js file and stuff like that I had before. Now it's only for our project right here. And what we want to look at is the server folder, what's actually in there. So if I open this guy, there's a lot of folders in here, and I just want to run over what's actually in here before we continue. Now let's start down here. There are two files here that's really important. One is the app.js file. That's actually where it all launches. That's pretty much the same as the server.js file that we worked on in the previous lesson. So this is actually where it sets up, it seeds the database. It has a lot of things that happens in here. It creates the Express setup, stuff like that. Now the other important file down here is the routes. In here you'll notice that right now I have two routes defined. One is the things routes. That's the one we've been working with in the previous lessons. And then the other is the users routes. That's actually authentication. That's how it can authenticate itself using this user framework. So these routes we're going into in a second. When we add a new API, it's actually going to add a new route here. So I'm just going to keep this one open. What else do we have? We have one called views. That's a place you could put all the basic views you have, like 404, page not found, stuff like that. We don't use this that much. We're going to make our own views when we get to it. So I'll just leave it here. I don't care about it. We could put it back later. Then we have one called config, a folder called config. That's configuration. So in here you'll configure everything from Express, that's actually in here, where you set up a huge amount of different middleware where Express can do different crazy things. Like Mongo, we have actually here was where we changed the CSRF earlier to get the post running from Postman, and there's a lot of other things. How do you handle when it's in production, when it's in development? So there's a lot of Express settings in here. We have the same for the seeding. Then seeding is pretty much just pre-populating the database, and we'll do that later. And we have what will you do in a development environment? Well, then I'll look for this guy. So I'll create a Mongo database called course planner-dev, right? If it's in production, I'll make something else. If it's in test, I'll do something called test, right? So this is where it'll set up the different databases depending on the environment and other things. So let's move up. Components, here we have an error index. If it hits 404, it'll redirect it to the view. We don't want to get into that right now. The entire auth setup, this is a scary guy, and we'll look into it in a later module, but this is actually how we validate, how we make sure that we solved, how we use the bearer token, a lot of things that we'll get into later. And right now we're using something called Passport to do this. We'll figure it out later. Then we have the important one, that important for us at least. This is the API that we're going to build right now. So here you'll see one called thing. Notice that it's a singulated form. It's not plural. It's only one thing. It's one user. And we're going to make one employee now in the next lesson. So that's where, if I open the thing, we have a lot of files in here, and I'll run over each one of them with you in the next lesson when we create the first employee. So it'll end up us having a user, a thing, and then an employee up here. That's the goal for the next lesson. So that was just to give you a basic overview. I'll show you a few more things since we have the time. Package.json, that's actually where all the dependencies for a project is. So this is what npm does. It says, if you do an npm install, if I write a command like this, let me just shut this down, go into my my project course planner here. If I write npm install here, it'll actually go in and open this file and say, I'm going to download Express, Morgan, body parser, blah, 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 blah. Each one of them it's going to download from npm. And that's why it's important that I wrote -save in the last one to actually save it in this list to get it later. Okay, let's end it for now and let's do our first endpoint.